Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world that smells faintly of coal smoke and lavender polish, where top hats still bob through the fog. But somewhere in the distance, the hum of something new is beginning to stir. It's the dawn of the 20th century, the Edwardian era, an age of manners, marvels, and mechanical miracles. Imagine yourself standing beneath a street lamp in 1905 London as it flickers to life with the faint buzz of electricity. A century of candles is dying, and 1,000 glowing filaments are being born. You're witnessing night itself being rewritten. You probably won't survive this. Well, not in the literal sense. The Edwardian years vanish just before the First World War tears the world apart. But tonight, you get to stand right there in that shimmering pause between the old and the new, when the future still felt polite, powdered, and possible. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing our little world map of night owls light up. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in a softly glowing Edwardian parlor. The wallpaper is patterned with delicate ivy, the chairs upholstered in velvet, and at the center of it all, a single electric bulb encased in a frosted glass shade. The faint hiss of current through filament replaces the sputter of a gas jet. You'd never think that this humble glow was once a dangerous luxury. In the 1890s, people whispered that electric lights could drive you mad. Some thought they caused fainting spells. Others feared they'd set the house ablaze if you looked at them too long. But the Edwardians, ever daring beneath their lace and restraint, embraced the current. By 1901, London had several electric power stations, and small generators hummed away in basements across the empire. The arrival of light meant the rearrangement of time itself. Factories no longer closed with sunset. Theaters extended their shows. Shopkeepers gleefully displayed goods behind glittering windows that turned night into day. You wander into the street, your shoes clicking on cobblestone still wet from rain. Overhead, the new electric tram lines hum with energy. The city glows faintly blue, artificial daylight spreading like gossip. A horse snorts nearby, clearly unimpressed. Thomas Edison had invented his bulb back in 1879, but the Edwardians turned it into a lifestyle. The incandescent lamp was no longer a laboratory experiment. It was an aesthetic, a promise of progress. Electricity meant cleanliness, efficiency, even morality. "Out with the soot, in with the sparkle," boasted one magazine ad. Imagine an influencer of 1906 showing off her fully electrified kitchen on early film, humming appliances replacing hand labor, her corset gleaming in the bulb's reflection. And here's a fun, fringe tidbit. Early users sometimes dusted their light bulbs with gold paint, thinking it gave a more natural glow. Others claimed the faint buzzing sound of alternating current could calm nervous disorders. Historians still argue whether those early electric spas actually helped anyone or just provided stylish shocks. You glance up, an entire skyline reshaped. The Edwardians built palaces of power. London's Bankside Power Station, the future Tate Modern, the Battersea Station blueprint already in discussion. Electricity wasn't just a tool, it was spectacle. Engineers became celebrities. Crowds gathered to watch demonstrations where arc lamps blazed bright enough to blind. One such event in Paris in 1900 drew over 50 million visitors to see the City of Light live up to its name. Electricity sneaked into everything. Doorbells rang without servants. The telephone, still young, buzzed in drawing rooms. Even the humble vacuum cleaner, a monster of a machine dragged by horse and cart, would be parked outside your townhouse for portable suction service. It took a small army to clean your rugs with electricity then, but oh, the status it implied. You can almost hear the gossip. Did you see the Pembroke's chandelier? Entirely electric, my dear. Oh, how modern, how vulgar. The Edwardian elite loved to flirt with modernity while pretending to fear it. Behind the lace curtains, light bulbs gleamed like forbidden fruit. And yet, just a few years later, even the humblest pub had a single bare bulb swinging over the counter. Factories glowed through the night. Workers, now illuminated, became more visible and more exhausted. The gift of light stretched hours, not just productivity. Labor activists complained that illumination turned every night shift into an endless day. Electricity was freedom for the rich and fatigue for the poor. Still, for all its contradictions, it was magic. Imagine the wonder of an Edwardian child seeing her first electric fairground ride, spinning and glittering like a captured star. You can almost hear the carnival organ puffing beside the soft buzz of filament. The century before had been powered by muscle and steam. The one ahead would hum with current. Let's not forget the world's first neon lights, born right at this time. In 1910, French engineer Georges Claude lit up a glass tube with electrified neon gas. The glow was hypnotic, a spectral red-orange that seemed alive. Within a decade, it would define modern advertising. But even then, people whispered that the light itself had moods. Some said it sang, others that it possessed the air. One historian described early electrical exhibitions as half science, half seance. You can picture it. Genteel ladies in feathered hats gasping as invisible energy jumps from coil to coil. Men in waistcoats grinning like stage magicians. The world was learning to believe in power it couldn't see. And that's the deeper shift of this first chapter, the invisible becoming visible. Electricity wasn't just invention, it was metaphor. For the first time, humanity understood that invisible forces, current, magnetism, radiation, were everywhere. The unseen became real. You can feel that same fascination today every time you glance at your phone charging silently on a table. As you walk through that Edwardian street, light reflecting on wet cobbles, you realize this was the true switch-on moment. The flick of a current turned the 19th century into the 20th. Gas jets went out, carbon filaments flared up, shadows thinned. Time itself began to accelerate. A woman passing by adjusts her hat beneath the glow. Behind her, in a shop window, an electric sign blinks. Tomorrow starts today. The slogan could just as well belong to our own age. You pause to listen. Somewhere nearby, a phonograph crackles to life, Edison's other gift. The sound mingles with the faint buzz of wires overhead. The modern world isn't arriving with a bang, it's arriving with a hum. You step closer to the lamppost, that modest miracle, and rest your hand on the iron base. It's warm to the touch, alive with the faint vibration of power. In that instant, you understand what the Edwardians must have felt, awe mixed with unease. Light had always belonged to the heavens, now it obeyed the switch in your hand. Historians still argue whether the electrification of daily life was the most transformative moment of the modern era, or simply the first in a chain reaction of bigger revolutions: automotive, digital, atomic. But one thing's certain: the Edwardians were the first generation to live half in shadow, half in glow, to see the stars dim not because the heavens changed, but because their cities began to shine back. A horse snorts again nearby. You look up. The lamplight pools on your boots, on the cobbles, on the brass clock at the corner, midnight glowing brighter than day. Electricity has arrived. The world won't ever be dark again. The morning after that glowing night, you wake to the sound of something new, not bird song or the clop of hooves, but a mechanical cough, a snort of steam, and the triumphant rattle of gears. You pull aside the lace curtain and there it is. A motor car, snaking its way down the cobbled street like a gleaming beetle in sunlight. Its driver, wrapped in goggles and scarf, looks like he's preparing to duel the wind. The engine sputters, roars, then falls silent. Everyone on the street stares. Somewhere a horse panics. You can practically smell the mix of oil, exhaust, and bewilderment. Welcome to the age of engines beneath silk hats. The Edwardian era loved spectacle, and nothing screamed modern quite like the automobile. By 1901, the British Motor Show had drawn crowds big enough to fill a football stadium today. Rolls-Royce had just been founded. Daimler was making vehicles for the upper crust. And Henry Ford, across the Atlantic, was perfecting a production method that would soon reshape how everyone, everywhere, lived. You can picture yourself strolling past the Park Lane Hotel in 1905, dodging carriages and those few, snorting mechanical beasts with brass lamps and spindly wheels. The air is thick with curiosity. Gentlemen stand with gloved hands clasped behind their backs, murmuring about horsepower as if it's a mythical creature. Women lift their skirts slightly higher to avoid the new street grime, proof that technology, even in its infancy, has fashion consequences. The early motor car wasn't just transport, it was personality. Each engine had its own rhythm, its own temperament. Starting one was a ritual. Crank the handle, hope it doesn't kick back and break your wrist. Whisper a few words to the mechanical spirits, then pray. If it caught, the street filled with applause. If it didn't, you just looked very silly in a very expensive hat. Here's your quirky tidbit. Early motorists were legally required to employ a man who walked in front of the vehicle waving a red flag. He was the locomotive attendant, meant to warn pedestrians that a motor car, capable of terrifying speeds like 15 miles per hour, was approaching. Imagine paying for the future and still having to follow a guy on foot. But once the Edwardians got the hang of it, speed fever struck. The new century's heartbeat was measured in miles per hour. Races sprouted across Europe, the Gordon Bennett Cup, the Paris-Vienna Rally, and eventually Brooklands in Surrey, the world's first purpose-built racetrack. You stand there now in your mind's eye, pressed against the wooden rail, as cars blur by in clouds of dust and daring. Their drivers wear dusters, leather caps, and expressions halfway between terror and ecstasy. The automobile didn't just move people, it reshaped space itself. Cities widened their roads. Countryside inns turned into petrol stations. Families began to wander further afield. A Sunday drive replaced the Sunday stroll. The world grew smaller, faster, and louder. Historians still argue whether the Edwardian motor boom was an invention revolution or a luxury cult. After all, only the wealthy could afford one. Yet the ripple it caused reached everyone. Roads improved. Tourism blossomed. Even the idea of personal freedom, the ability to go wherever you wanted, whenever you wanted, took root behind those steering wheels. The world of the pedestrian gave way to the world of the driver. You could say the Edwardians invented traffic jams. Now imagine you're standing at the intersection of old and new, literally. On one side, a horse-drawn carriage, on the other, a sputtering motor car. The driver and the coachman exchange glares, each certain the other is doomed to extinction. A newspaper boy watches and shouts, "Motor car wins," before running off to sell headlines about the coming age of speed. It wasn't just about transport, though. The internal combustion engine, this compact miracle of explosions, found its way everywhere. In boats, motorcycles, even early airplanes, but we'll save that for our next stop. Engineers became artists, crafting engines the way composers wrote symphonies. Every piston had rhythm, every gear had grace. And then came the buses. The London General Omnibus Company electrified the city's pulse with double-deckers powered by combustion instead of horse legs. People could now ride from Kensington to Piccadilly without the faint smell of manure following them. The modern city commuter was born, annoyed at delays even then. But here's something few people know. Some early buses still carried straw on their floors, just in case passengers missed the familiar scent of the horse era. You can almost laugh imagining a proper Edwardian lady declaring, "It doesn't feel right without the hay, Harold." There's also a quieter revolution happening in the background, one of design and craftsmanship. The Edwardian automobile era gave rise to the concept of brand desire. Rolls-Royce promised the best car in the world. The Silver Ghost purred so quietly that newspapers called it the Whispering Wonder. It was as much about engineering as it was about elegance. A man didn't just drive a car, he wore it, like a tailored suit made of steel. In fact, the idea of luxury marketing, of selling dreams rather than devices, began right here, under the Edwardian bonnet. The automobile became a stage for the modern self. And oh, the adventures. There's the tale of Charles Rolls himself, who in 1907 attempted a London to Monte Carlo journey just to prove his car's reliability. He nearly froze in the Alps but made it, barely, and arrived looking like a soot-covered ghost of triumph. You can almost hear him shouting over the engine, "Future secured." At the same time, tinkering inventors were in their sheds dreaming of smaller, cheaper cars. In Birmingham, Herbert Austin began crafting a motor for the masses. In Detroit, Henry Ford was doing the same. The Model T would arrive in 1908, just as the Edwardian age was bowing out. By then, the dream of universal mobility was unstoppable. But progress has a price tag and a smell. The crisp air of Edwardian countryside began to mingle with exhaust fumes. Horses panicked, cyclists cursed, and newspaper editors fretted about road anarchy. The government scrambled to introduce speed limits and driving licenses. The first traffic cop took his post wearing immaculate white gloves. Somewhere, inevitably, someone ran him over. You stroll through Hyde Park now, the crunch of gravel underfoot. Around you, an afternoon car parade. Models from de Dion Boughton, Napier, Panhard, and Bentz roll past in stately procession. The crowd applauds, waving Union Jacks and parasols. The carriages that once ruled this park have been outclassed by machines that glitter like jewelry boxes. Children point and squeal. The sound of the engines blends into a symphony of progress. Still, not everyone applauded. Some poets mourned the murder of silence. Others feared that speed itself would deform the soul. And in truth, something was changing. The Edwardians didn't yet know it, but they were training humanity to live at a new tempo. You'd never again measure distance the same way. There's an odd moment of peace as you watch one motorcar stall near the gate. The driver climbs out, wipes his brow, and tinkers with the crank. Passers-by smirk. A child whispers, "Future, Daddy," and he nods. "Yes, son, but it needs oil." A century later, you can still feel that exchange echo in your world. Every traffic jam, every honk, every long road trip beginning in a moment of frustration and wonder just like that. So you tuck your hands into your coat pockets and walk on. Behind you, the engines cough and roar back to life. Ahead lies a horizon that will soon hum with airplanes and spark with radio waves. But for now, you can still smell the mix of horse and petrol, the scent of one century fading as another accelerates past. The motor car has done its work. It has taught the world to move faster than thought, to chase tomorrow before the clock strikes 12. And you're standing right there at the crossroads, hearing the heartbeat of modernity rev for the very first time. The engines fade behind you, but the hum of modern life doesn't stop. It simply shifts pitch. You're standing now in a quiet Edwardian study, where mahogany panels gleam under the soft glow of electric lamps. On the desk rests something astonishing, a telephone, polished black and heavy as a loaf of bread. Its cord snakes away toward the wall, vanishing into the mystery of wires that now knit the entire world together. You lift the receiver, hear the faint buzz of connection, and then, miracle, a voice. A real human voice transmitted over miles of wire, thin but clear as though whispering from the next room. "Good evening," says the operator. "Number, please." Welcome to the age of wired voices and whispered worlds. A few decades earlier, shouting across a valley was the fastest form of live communication. But by the Edwardian years, the telephone was shrinking those valleys into inches. The human voice had become electric, bottled in copper, and sold by subscription. In drawing rooms and offices alike, you could now summon another person's attention without so much as leaving your chair. It was the ultimate Edwardian luxury, omnipresence with good posture. The telephone wasn't new. It had been born in the late 19th century, but it was the Edwardians who turned it from an experiment into an experience. Picture yourself as a guest in 1906 at Claridge's Hotel in London, where each floor proudly boasts a telephone cabinet. You step in, close the little oak door, and speak into a black trumpet. A butler waits outside, pretending not to eavesdrop. You feel half magician, half spy. The early phone network was almost romantic in its inefficiency. To reach someone, you first rang the local exchange, where an operator, usually a woman in a starched blouse, manually connected your line by inserting metal plugs into a switchboard. It looked like musical performance, and in a way it was. Voices crackled through her hands. She controlled the web of conversation that stitched the Edwardian world together. A fringe tidbit for you. Some early operators recognized customers just by their coughs or their hello. They could even tell when two callers were flirting. Apparently, a lot of that went on over the wires. But not everyone trusted the new magic. Newspapers warned that telephone talk might damage social etiquette. How would society survive if you could just call someone without leaving a calling card first? The horror. Etiquette manuals scrambled to catch up. One advised, never shout into the receiver, it shows poor breeding. You can almost laugh now, but think about it. The Edwardians were the first generation to face the anxiety of instant communication. Every ping, every buzz, every hello, that interrupts dinner. Yeah, they started it. The telephone didn't just connect homes, it rewired business. Stockbrokers could react to market shifts in real time. Shipping firms could coordinate fleets across continents. The first telemarketing calls began as earnest clerks reading out product lists to bewildered customers who hadn't even asked to be called. A century later, you're still pressing ignore. Historians still argue whether the telephone spread was faster in cities or rural areas. Some claim the countryside resisted, fearing that invisible voices meant spiritual intrusion. Others argue that farmers loved it. It saved them from endless trips into town. Both might be right. The Edwardian world, split between gaslight tradition and electric modernity, buzzed uneasily as the wires grew. Let's take a step back and look at the tangle itself. By 1902, London's skyline was already webbed with telephone wires, drooping like cobwebs between chimneys. Engineers in bowler hats climbed poles like acrobats. Telegraph offices hummed beside the new exchanges. Under the streets, bundles of cable pulsed quietly with gossip, news, and business deals. The air was still, but the world was alive with chatter. There's something intimate about this transformation. Unlike the roar of engines or the blaze of electric light, the telephone changed life one whisper at a time. It was private, personal, almost sacred. The voice of someone you loved could now travel through miles of metal and return intact. Imagine being an Edwardian soldier posted in India, hearing your mother's voice crackling across continents. The miracle would seem divine. Of course, technology being what it is, divine miracles occasionally turn demonic. There are delightful reports of strange ghost calls in the early 1900s, phantom rings with no one on the line, voices of strangers bleeding through from crossed wires. People swore the system was haunted. Engineers insisted it was just signal interference, but where's the fun in that? Even art felt the tremor. Poets began writing about mechanical longing. The novelist E.M. Forster described a world where people lived underground, speaking only through screens and phones. A nightmare vision in the machine stops, 1909. Reading it now feels eerily familiar, doesn't it? The fear that connection might replace contact, that the whisper in your ear could one day replace the person sitting next to you. But for the Edwardians, the telephone was still mostly marvel, not menace. Picture the moment King Edward VII made his first call to Scotland Yard, congratulating them on their bravery and technological modernity. One can imagine the poor inspector sweating on the other end, wondering if it was proper to say, "Your Majesty," or just "hello." Meanwhile, on the domestic front, phones were slowly creeping into middle-class homes. They came in polished wooden boxes, often mounted on walls near the staircase, the social hub of the house. The children weren't allowed to touch it, of course. "That's for grown-ups," mothers would scold, as if voices traveled with parental supervision. The advertisements of the day were works of art. One depicted a young woman in an evening gown smiling dreamily into the receiver, her expression pure modern romance. The caption read, "He's only a call away." The telephone, it turned out, sold not just convenience but emotion. And here's a detail almost too charming to believe. Some Edwardian homeowners hired telephone decorators to ensure their devices matched the wallpaper. Nothing says, "We fear progress, but we want it to match the drapes," quite like that. But it wasn't all drawing room glamour. In the industrial world, the telephone became the nervous system of the age. Power plants, railways, hospitals, all pulsed with instant communication. Emergencies could be reported, crises managed, decisions made before the ink dried on telegrams. The world was learning to think faster. You trace a finger along the cord, feeling its warmth. Somewhere beyond this room, hundreds of voices are leaping across copper, colliding, overlapping, weaving the invisible architecture of conversation. It's not so different from the web that connects you now. Different medium, same miracle. A clock ticks nearby. Outside, the street still murmurs with horse hooves, but above them hums a softer sound, the faint vibration of speech made electric. Somewhere, two lovers whisper across town. A factory foreman curses a late shipment. A prime minister consults his aide. And for the first time in history, all those words exist simultaneously, airborne through wire. The future has found its voice. You place the receiver back on its cradle. The click echoes faintly, final yet promising. Beyond this quiet study, the world is getting noisier. Telephones, phonographs, automobiles, all clamoring for attention. You can feel the tempo rising, conversation accelerating. Humanity, once limited by distance, is beginning to learn what it means to live in constant reach. Before you leave, you glance one last time at the device. Its brass fittings gleam softly like jewelry. You wonder how long it'll be before someone invents a way to carry it in their pocket. Don't laugh, they were already dreaming. The wire hums faintly, a lullaby for a world learning to speak through circuits. And as you step out into the Edwardian street, your own breath becomes part of that quiet electric symphony. Every whisper a spark, every spark a step toward the digital dawn waiting a century ahead. The streets below are still chattering with engines and the soft buzz of wires, but above you, oh above you, something is stirring that no copper line can contain. You tilt your head, squinting against the morning light, and there it is. A fragile contraption of wood and canvas wobbling uncertainly through the sky. It groans, dips, steadies, and keeps flying. You blink. A machine, heavier than air, refusing to fall. You're witnessing one of the Edwardian world's most audacious acts of rebellion against gravity. Welcome to the age of flight, an era fueled equally by tin courage, and the firm conviction that humans were never meant to stay on the ground. The scene around you is a strange mix of picnic and peril. It's 1909, perhaps, an air show in Rhymes, or maybe the windswept fields of Farnborough. Families in waistcoats and long skirts cheer as aviators climb into spindly biplanes that look less like vehicles and more like nightmares constructed by enthusiastic carpenters. The smell of castor oil mingles with the tang of champagne. A brass band plays something martial and slightly off-key. The crowd holds its collective breath as one more daredevil attempts to persuade the air to hold him up. You can feel the vibration of the engine through the soles of your boots. It's small, an early rotary engine sputtering like an asthmatic dragon. The pilot, goggles down, scarf snapping behind him, gives a jaunty wave and then roar. The machine lurches forward, rattles over the grass, and against every law of reason begins to climb. You feel your stomach drop in sympathy. Historians still argue whether the Wright brothers truly changed everything in 1903, or whether Europe's early aviators, the likes of Alberto Santos Dumont and Louis Blériot, deserve more credit for turning flight from novelty into normality. What's certain is that the Edwardians took the fragile idea of flight and turned it into a movement. Santos Dumont, for instance, flew his airship around the Eiffel Tower in 1901 to claim a prize, and promptly landed outside a cafe for a celebratory espresso. Only an Edwardian could make conquering the sky look like a morning errand. By 1909, Blériot had crossed the English Channel in a plane held together with little more than glue, guts, and hope. You can almost hear the gasp of that moment. England, once protected by sea and empire, suddenly felt a new vulnerability. If a man could cross the channel in a flying toothpick, who knew what might follow? Still, for most people, flight was less about fear and more about romance. Newspapers wrote about aviators as if they were knights reborn, conquering invisible dragons. Every photograph of a biplane midair looked like a miracle, every pilot a poet with oil under his fingernails. Aviation clubs formed faster than you could say updraft. Even schoolchildren began building gliders from broom handles and bedsheets. You wander now through one of those makeshift airfields, grass flattened by wheels, tents flapping in the wind. Somewhere, a mechanic swears in French as a propeller refuses to cooperate. Another man, pale and sweating, scribbles equations in a notebook, muttering about lift coefficients. This is science, yes, but it feels like theater. And oh, the outfits. Long leather coats, silk scarves, goggles that made everyone look perpetually astonished. Early flight wasn't just an experiment, it was a fashion statement. Dress to crash well, as one daring pilot supposedly said. Here's your quirky tidbit. Early pilots sometimes took cats with them as mascots for luck. One even insisted that his feline companion could predict turbulence by the twitch of its tail. The Royal Aero Club's records are peppered with notes like passenger, cat. You have to admire the optimism. As the planes climb higher, so does your imagination. For the Edwardians, flight wasn't just about getting somewhere faster. It was about reimagining what somewhere meant. For centuries, the sky had been reserved for angels and meteorologists. Now, ordinary people could slip the Earth's leash. You can almost taste the thin air, the scent of burning oil, the rush of wind against your face as if the planet itself were finally exhaling. But even in this romance, there's risk. The mortality rate among early pilots was appalling. Wooden frames snapped midair, engines failed, parachutes were still a rumor. Newspapers covered each crash with equal parts horror and admiration. "Hero falls from the heavens," read one headline, as if gravity were an offended god. You crouch by the grass, picking up a splinter of propeller, warm, almost alive. It's hard not to feel reverent. Each of these contraptions, these half-finished dreams, pushed humanity closer to something vast. Back in London, the public devoured aviation news like candy. Airplanes appeared in postcards, plays, and even chocolate ads. A popular song declared, "Come, Josephine in my flying machine," and every child hummed it while spinning toy propellers. You'd swear you could see the future shimmering on the horizon. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Politicians fretted that aerial warfare might render armies obsolete. Some clergymen preached that humans had no business trespassing in God's domain. And quite a few practical-minded citizens simply said, "Looks noisy." Historians still debate whether the Edwardians saw the airplane as symbol of peace or preview of apocalypse. After all, only a few years later, these same machines would darken the skies of Europe with far deadlier cargo. But for now, for this one fleeting moment, they are miracles, pure and shining. You tilt your head back again. Above you, a biplane banks sharply, sunlight glinting off its wings. The pilot waves, impossibly small against the vastness of the sky. The crowd below cheers like worshippers. A woman beside you clutches her hat and murmurs, "He's touching heaven." Perhaps he is. You imagine, for a second, what the world must have felt like just then, so full of promise that even the clouds seemed conquerable. The same spirit that wired telephones, built motorcars, and lit cities now dares to reach beyond gravity itself. The Edwardian era didn't just invent machines, it invented momentum. You walk to the edge of the field, the grass cool under your shoes. The plane circles once more, then glides down, bumping to a halt. The pilot climbs out, his face streaked with oil, his grin wide enough to split the sky. Reporters rush forward, children wave paper flags. The future, it seems, has just landed. You stand there a moment longer, the wind tugging at your coat, the scent of burnt oil lingering in the air. Somewhere behind you, the brass band resumes its tune. A small boy tugs at your sleeve and whispers, "Do you think we'll fly to the moon one day?" You smile. You could tell him yes, but that would spoil the surprise. The pilot raises a glass of champagne, and the crowd cheers once more. Engines cough, the earth trembles, and another machine rattles down the grass into the open sky. The future lifts off again, fragile and magnificent, one improbable wing beat at a time. As the echo of engines fades into the horizon, you turn your gaze toward another corner of the Edwardian world, one far quieter, but every bit as revolutionary. Gone are the roaring propellers and gas-fumed airfields. Here, you find yourself inside a small laboratory lined with brass instruments, beakers, and wires that seem to hum softly with potential. The smell of ozone and ink mingles with something else, possibility. This is the domain of the wireless, the invention that taught humanity how to speak across silence. It began, as all great things do, with static. Imagine the crackle of electricity, faint and irregular, crawling through the ether. Guglielmo Marconi, the young Italian genius at the heart of this transformation, once described it as capturing whispers from nowhere. You can almost see him now, sleeves rolled up, hair a mess of inspiration, scribbling equations on a smudged page while coils of copper snake across the table. He was hardly alone. Scientists like Nikola Tesla, Oliver Lodge, and Heinrich Hertz had already lit sparks in the darkness. But it was Marconi who turned theory into conversation. By 1896, He'd patented his system of wireless telegraphy. By 1901, he had sent the first signal across the Atlantic. And by the Edwardian years, those ghostly dots and dashes were threading the world together in invisible lines of light. To appreciate what that meant, you have to remember how the world once felt, vast, disconnected, and slow. Messages crossed oceans by ship. News from America might take days to reach London. But now, tap out a message in Cornwall and a receiver in Newfoundland could hear it instantly. The Atlantic, once an obstacle, had become an echo chamber. The Edwardians called it magic without wires. The newspapers gushed. No more waiting, the world speaks as one. And indeed, for the first time, it truly could. You wander through the cluttered lab, watching an assistant carefully adjust a tuning coil. Sparks jump between electrodes, hissing and fatting. A voice, faint, quivering, emerges from the receiver. Testing, testing. You blink. Someone miles away just spoke into the air, and the air itself carried his words. It feels supernatural, and in a sense it was. Ships, too, began carrying Marconi sets, and sailors found themselves tethered to the mainland by invisible threads. The Titanic, famously, had two wireless operators on board, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride. Their desperate Morse transmissions the night of April 14, 1912, turned wireless from a novelty into necessity. Countless lives were saved because of those electric pulses leaping across the North Atlantic dark. But before tragedy and regulation came wonder. The Edwardians adored their gadgets. Wireless clubs popped up like mushrooms. Amateurs built transmitters in attics and gardens. You might imagine a young boy in 1908, sitting cross-legged beside his home-built crystal set, headphones pressed tight to his ears, trembling with excitement as he picks up his first transmission. Faint dots and dashes whispering through the static. Marconi's magic, his mother calls it, shaking her head with equal parts pride and worry. Of course, like all new technologies, wireless attracted its share of skeptics. Invisible voices, scoffed one London journalist, are suitable only for lunatics and poets. Another dismissed it as the latest trick of the electro-charlatans. Yet within a decade, the very same critics were tuning in for news, concerts, and weather reports. By the 1910s, the wireless had leapt from the laboratory to the living room. It changed how people thought about distance. It shrank the planet. For the first time in history, a fisherman off the coast of Norway, a telegraph clerk in Cairo, and a passenger aboard a steamship in the Indian Ocean could all share the same moment, the same message, the same sound. You step out of the lab now into the Edwardian street beyond. Overhead, telephone wires hum like tired violin strings, but somewhere beyond them, something subtler and grander moves. Waves invisible to the human eye, wrapping the globe in their unseen embrace. A man at a newsstand folds his newspaper under one arm, marveling. They say you can hear Paris in New York now, he tells his friend. His friend frowns. Hear Paris? I, the man replies, through the air. They both laugh, disbelieving, but not entirely. The world has begun to expect the impossible. And as you walk farther down the street, you realize everything hums now. Not just the machines, but the people themselves, vibrating with the strange new rhythm of a connected world. Electric trams clang by. Lamps flicker to life at dusk. A motorcar snorts impatiently at a crossing. Even the air feels charged, as if the entire Edwardian age were a tuning fork struck by destiny. It was not just progress, it was acceleration. Every invention seemed to demand another, every spark called forth a storm. And somewhere, deep in the hum of it all, a quiet truth took root. The Edwardians were not merely inventing machines. They were inventing modernity. The century ahead would be born from their noise, their daring, their dreams. But for now here, in this golden moment before war and worry, the world is alive with static, light, and possibility. You close your eyes. Somewhere faintly you can still hear it. Testing 1, 2, the world is listening. The hum of wireless waves fades behind you, replaced by the quieter rhythm of home life. The shuffle of slippers on linoleum, the soft clatter of dishes in a sink, the creak of a chair that's seen better days. You find yourself stepping into an Edwardian kitchen, though not the kind from history books lined with soot and copper pots. No, this one glows faintly with the promise of the modern, Edward that was just learning to walk. Electric light gleams off polished enamel. A strange little box sits on the counter, wires trailing behind it like tails of tame serpents. Inside, coils heat up invisibly, ready to brown a slice of bread at the push of a button. Yes, the first toasters have arrived. You can smell it already. That warm, comforting scent of toast, slightly overdone because nobody yet figured out the perfect timing. Welcome to the electric home, the dream that began right here in the Edwardian years. Just a decade or two before, domestic life was powered by muscle, coal, and patience. Water was fetched, clothes scrubbed, fires coaxed alive, and dinner cooked by instinct more than measurement. But now, as electricity began snaking into city apartments and suburban villas, an entirely new rhythm of living took shape. The Edwardians believed technology could make life elegant, and more importantly, easier. Or so the salesman claimed. Imagine stepping into an Edwardian department store, your shoes echoing on polished marble floors. A salesman gestures proudly to a display of gadgets, electric kettles, vacuum cleaners, curling tongs, sewing machines. Everything gleams with promise. No smoke, no mess, no danger, he declares, though you're not entirely sure you believe him. A small crowd gathers as he demonstrates the new electric iron. The device hums quietly as it warms. Housewives lean forward in fascination. One murmurs, "No coals, no gas." Another whispers, "But what if it shocks you?" The salesman only grins. "Madam," he says, "the future is perfectly safe." He was wrong, of course. Early wiring was about as safe as juggling lightning bolts in a bathtub, but let's not spoil the mood. Historians still argue whether the Edwardian home truly became modern, or whether it just began to pretend to. After all, while city dwellers enjoyed the novelty of electricity, rural households were still years, sometimes decades behind. But symbols matter, and nothing symbolized progress quite like an illuminated kitchen. It wasn't only about convenience, it was about control. For centuries, servants had run the machinery of middle-class life. Bells rang, fires were lit, and meals appeared as if by magic. But now, appliances promised independence. The Edwardian hostess could cook, clean, and manage her home herself, aided by sleek devices that seemed almost alive. This shift was social dynamite. On one hand, it gave women more personal control and dignity. On the other, it added yet another layer of expectation. The modern woman, glossy magazines declared, was efficient, graceful, and above all scientific. There's a touch of irony in that, isn't there? Machines meant to lighten the load somehow made life busier. You pause by an electric refrigerator prototype, a tall, boxy contraption humming faintly in the corner. Inside, milk, butter, eggs, everything cool and fresh without the daily block of melting ice. In 1906, only a handful of wealthy homes had one, but the dream was already alive. "One day," says a man in a tweed suit nearby, "every house in Britain will have its own electric servant." He's not wrong. He's just about 50 years early. A vacuum cleaner rolls past, powered by what looks like a motorcycle engine attached to a hose. It takes two people to move it, one to pull, one to steer. Portable, the salesman insists. You bite back a laugh. Still, the fascination was real. For Edwardians, every switch felt like magic. Light itself seemed to obey. One flick and darkness vanished. That alone could make you feel like a magician. In drawing rooms, people installed lamps shaped like lilies, dragons, or celestial orbs. Electricity wasn't just practical, it was fashionable. In fact, lighting designers became the rock stars of their day. There were even electric balls, where dancers glided beneath chandeliers powered by private generators, their sequined gowns glittering like molten starlight. But electricity wasn't the only change happening inside Edwardian walls. Bathrooms, too, underwent quiet revolutions. Running water and indoor plumbing were spreading fast, replacing tin baths and buckets. Imagine the bliss, hot water on demand. The first heated towel rails appeared around this time, though their purpose was mainly to impress guests. Modern comfort, one magazine called it, is the new morality. Even the architecture shifted. Kitchens moved from dark basements to brighter spaces nearer the living quarters. Windows widened. Walls gleamed with white tiles to show off the new obsession with hygiene. Everything had to look clean, even if it was. The domestic sphere was becoming the testing ground of progress. You picture a young Edwardian couple showing off their electrified home to friends. "Look," the husband says proudly, flicking a switch to light the hallway. His guests gasp politely. The wife demonstrates her new vacuum, loud as a train, and assures them it saves hours of sweeping. In truth, she'll still spend all afternoon using it, but no one dares say that aloud. And yet you can't help but feel the optimism. The hum of progress fills the air, soft but insistent. It's the same note that vibrates through the whole Edwardian age, the belief that life could be perfected. A quirky fact here: some early electric toasters had open coils so exposed that toast could occasionally burst into flames. Manufacturers advised users to keep a bucket of sand nearby, just in case. Because nothing says breakfast serenity like a small domestic fire. Still, each innovation, no matter how temperamental, brought the future one inch closer. The Edwardian home became a symbol of the 20th century's first great transformation, the merging of technology with intimacy. Machines no longer lived only in factories or workshops. They were invited into living rooms, bedrooms, kitchens. They became part of the family. You step out of that house now and glance back through a window. Inside, you see the faint glow of electric light warming the air. The occupants move about, unaware that their small domestic revolutions will ripple across time. They're simply living, as people always do, trying to make tomorrow a little easier than today. And as you walk on, you realize that this quiet, glittering house is the true heart of the Edwardian dream, not the motorcars or the airplanes, but the promise that technology could make ordinary life extraordinary. You step back into the cool evening air, the glow from that electric kitchen fatting behind you. The cobbled streets ahead shimmer faintly under the halo of street lamps, their glass domes fogged with city breath. You wander forward, and suddenly, everything feels bigger. Shopfronts rise on either side of you like glass cathedrals, their windows filled with glittering objects. Silk gowns, gramophones, typewriters, shining bicycles. Behind the panes, lights blaze without flicker, displaying not just goods but dreams. Welcome to the age of style and steel, where the Edwardian world learns the art of showing off. You're standing in front of Selfridge's, London, 1909. Its opening was practically a national event, an American idea planted firmly in British soil by a certain Harry Gordon Selfridge, who believed that shopping should be a pleasure, not a chore. "The customer," he said with a smile, "is always right." You might roll your eyes at that cliché now, but in the Edwardian era, it was revolutionary. The store sprawled across Oxford Street like a palace of consumer desire. 9 acres of goods, 7 floors, 500 departments, perfume, gloves, clocks, cameras, everything from teaspoons to telescopes. And the best part, you didn't need to buy anything. You could simply walk in, browse, dream. That was new. Shopping, once a practical errand for necessities, became a social performance, a leisure activity, a declaration of identity. The Edwardians adored performance. Look around. The architecture itself has learned to pose. Buildings of this age gleam with confidence, steel frames dressed in stone corsets, topped with domes that catch the last light of sunset. From London to New York, from Paris to Bombay, these facades all hum the same tune: progress, elegance, empire. You step inside Selfridge's now and your senses overload. There's the faint perfume of lavender from the cosmetics counter, the murmur of conversation, the clatter of shoes on marble. Somewhere nearby, a phonograph is playing a jaunty ragtime tune. You wander past glass cases filled with jewelry, past mirrors that make you briefly doubt your own reflection. In one corner, a salesgirl, white gloves, perfect posture, demonstrates a new line of typewriters. Click, click, click. She smiles up at you. "Would you like to try, sir?" You sit, press a key, and the letter E appears like a magic trick. You half expect applause. This is the moment when craftsmanship and commerce marry spectacle. Designers begin thinking like artists. Shopkeepers begin thinking like theater directors. Storefronts turn into stages, mannequins into silent actresses draped in lace and ambition. And it isn't just retail that's transforming. Cities themselves are becoming exhibits of invention. The Edwardian years saw the rise of reinforced concrete, of steel skeletons that allowed architects to build higher and lighter. Skyscrapers were still rare in London, but in New York, they grew like iron weeds. The Flatiron Building, the Singer Tower, each one daring the heavens to blink. Historians still argue whether these structures represented triumph or arrogance. Were they cathedrals of progress or monuments to human hubris? You might say both. After all, nothing says confidence like putting an elevator in your ego. You step outside again. Horse-drawn carriages rattle past early motor taxis. Streetcar bells echo down wide boulevards. Even the advertisements have grown ambitious. "The future at your fingertips," boasts one sign for an electric shaver. Another promises instant cleanliness with a new brand of soap that sounds suspiciously radioactive. A quirky fact: some Edwardian shop owners hired window dressers trained in psychology. They studied how long customers' eyes lingered on certain colors, how reflections doubled desire. One London paper called it the new science of temptation. And what a science it became. At night, when the gas lights dim and electric ones bloom, Oxford Street transforms into a glowing artery of motion and money. Couples stroll arm in arm beneath awnings. Vendors shout over the hiss of buses. The air smells of coal smoke and perfume. Above it all, neon signs flicker for the first time, still rare, still uncertain, like lightning trapped in glass. Marvelous, people say. Modern. You catch sight of a small boy staring at the glowing letters, wide-eyed. "Papa," he whispers, "it's like the stars came down." His father nods, too proud to admit he's just as enchanted. The Edwardian obsession with style wasn't limited to buildings and clothes. It extended into identity. Fashion became faster, more expressive. Women's silhouettes shifted from rigid corsets to looser, flowing designs inspired by Art Nouveau. Men traded heavy frock coats for lighter suits, crisp collars, and bowler hats that practically winked with self-assurance. Even leisure had to look modern. Bicycles gleamed with nickel. Cameras dangled from neck straps. You couldn't simply exist. You had to display yourself as part of the age. And the empire's wealth made all of it possible. Raw materials streamed in from colonies: cotton, rubber, tea, silk, feeding the machine of consumerism. It was a global circuit powered by ships, sweat, and ambition. The same rails that carried goods also carried ideas. Not everyone was impressed. Critics muttered that the new architecture felt soulless, that mass production was killing craftsmanship. "Our cities," one writer sighed, "shine like mirrors but feel like cages." Another retorted, "Better a cage with lights than a stable with shadows." You smile to yourself. The debate sounds familiar, doesn't it? We're still having it today, only now we call it minimalism versus maximalism and argue about it on the internet. You pause at a corner cafe, its windows fogged by laughter and steam. Inside, Edwardians sip tea, read newspapers, gossip about who's been seen where. Somewhere in the chatter, you catch fragments of the future: wireless music, moving pictures, the motor age. The world they're inventing glows just beyond their understanding. You can almost see it reflected in the shop windows. A future city of chrome and glass, lit not by gas but by ambition. The Edwardian era believed that beauty could civilize, that progress could be polished, and that every shining surface reflected human triumph. But beauty, as always, carried a shadow. Behind every display, someone cleaned the glass. Behind every elegant mannequin, someone stitched till midnight. Still, for one brief moment, the world sparkled without irony. The Edwardians built their dreams in steel and silk, believing the shine would never fade. You turn your head one last time before walking on. The shop lights shimmer like constellations, a human-made galaxy of elegance and appetite. Somewhere faintly, a phonograph still plays. And in that music, you hear it, the hum of a civilization teaching itself how to want. The city's glow fades as you wander from the crowded boulevards into a quieter quarter: narrow streets, crisp night air, and a faint scent of disinfectant lingering in the wind. Gone are the mirrored shop windows and silk hats. Instead, white-coated figures move briskly through gaslit corridors, voices echoing in calm authority. You've stepped into the age of medicine, microbes, and miracles, an Edwardian frontier just as daring as flight or electricity, though fought not in the sky or the laboratory, but in the human body itself. Hospitals in the late Victorian era had already begun to reform, but the Edwardian years turned antiseptic theory into practice. You glance through a doorway and see a surgeon washing his hands, not a quick rinse, but a ritual scrub, fingers raw and red from carbolic acid. Instruments gleam coldly under electric lamps. Sheets are starched and spotless. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs, a dry, persistent sound that reminds you how fragile life still is. The old specters of disease are everywhere: tuberculosis, typhoid, diphtheria, smallpox, invisible enemies that haunted every household. You can almost feel the weight of fear that hung in the air, back when a simple fever could become a death sentence. But for the first time, there's also hope. A young nurse passes you, humming under her breath. On her tray sits something new, small glass vials filled with clear liquid. Vaccines, antitoxins. Humanity's first real attempts to fight back against its microscopic foes. It's hard to overstate how radical this shift felt. For centuries, sickness had been blamed on miasmas, bad air, moral weakness, even divine punishment. Now, thanks to germ theory, the enemy had a face, or at least a shape under the microscope. "The world," wrote one doctor, "has been made visible again." You move closer to one of those microscopes, peering through the lens. A drop of fluid magnifies into a swirling galaxy of life. Rods, spheres, spirals, all dancing in a world too small for the naked eye. The sight is both beautiful and terrifying. Somewhere in a nearby ward, a patient is receiving ether before surgery. You hear the hiss of gas, the slow rhythm of breath. Surgery without agony, another miracle of the age. A generation earlier, operations were brutal affairs of speed and screaming. Now, with anesthesia, precision replaced panic. Historians still argue whether the Edwardian era was the true birth of modern medicine, or simply the rehearsal. After all, penicillin was still decades away, and X-rays, discovered by Wilhelm Röntgen in 1895, were used enthusiastically but dangerously, often without proper shielding. Doctors cheerfully burned their hands in the name of progress. But the ambition was unmistakable. Hospitals became temples of science, their corridors lined with tiled walls and electrical fixtures that made them feel sterile, literally and symbolically. The architecture itself promised cleanliness. The Edwardians worshipped hygiene. Soap advertisements depicted cleanliness as patriotism. Housewives were told that dust was the enemy of empire. You can't help but smirk at that one. Rule Britannia, indeed, just don't sneeze. Even the cities began to breathe differently. Public health movements spread like gospel: clean water systems, sewage reform, public baths. London, once infamous for its choking smog and fetid rivers, began to shine with a fragile kind of order. The modern notion of sanitation, flush toilets, filtered water, clean streets, wasn't just civic policy. It was moral identity. You step outside the hospital now and follow the sound of laughter down a nearby alley. Children are playing hopscotch, their chalk marks glowing faintly in the lamplight. A woman in an apron leans from a window, scolding them gently. "Mind the puddles," she warns. "That's where illness lives." She's not wrong. A quirky fact: Edwardian mothers were encouraged to open windows at least 12 times a day to let in fresh air, which they believed could chase away tuberculosis. Many genuinely did this even in winter, wrapping children in blankets and declaring them hardened to health. Some doctors agreed. Others just shivered in silence. But medicine wasn't just about science, it was about trust. Before antibiotics, people relied heavily on intuition, ritual, and the reassuring authority of the doctor's presence. The classic image of the Edwardian physician, bowler hat, leather bag, calm voice, became an icon of reliability. "Good morning, Mrs. Blythe," he might say softly, placing 2 fingers on a wrist. "We'll have you right as rain." Whether he could or not was another matter. You find yourself in a small dispensary now. Bottles line the shelves in neat rows: laudanum, quinine, arsenic tonics, yes, really, and patent cures with names that sound half magical, half menacing. Dr. Bateman's pectoral drops, Mother Sagel's syrup, electric elixir of youth. Many of these so-called cures were pure nonsense, but the faith they inspired revealed something deeper: a yearning to master fate. And yet, amid all this optimism, shadows linger. Hospitals remain overcrowded. Women die in childbirth. Poor families still share rooms where disease can spread overnight. The bright lights of science don't reach every corner. A young doctor you pass pauses to rub his temples. "We can see the germs now," he mutters, "but not yet how to stop them." You can almost hear the weight in his words, the fatigue of being halfway to salvation. Still, the Edwardians pressed on. In laboratories across Europe, researchers raced to identify pathogens, to invent new antiseptics, to refine vaccines. The first clinical trials began to take shape, clumsy and uncertain but groundbreaking nonetheless. In 1907, Paul Ehrlich introduced salvarsan, the first modern antimicrobial drug, a targeted treatment for syphilis. They called it the magic bullet. It wasn't perfect, but it was the beginning of chemotherapy in its truest sense. Humanity had finally fired its first shot against the microbial world. The cultural impact was profound. Science no longer seemed confined to scholars. It became a source of public wonder. Magazines printed photographs of bacteria. Schools taught germ theory to children. Even advertisements began using microscopes as symbols of progress. You smile at the irony. Once people feared invisible evils, now they sold soap with them. And there's something oddly touching about that. This faith in cleanliness, in the idea that knowledge itself could wash away pain. You step out into the night once more. The air feels sharp and clean. Somewhere in the distance, a hospital lamp burns late, its light steady against the dark. Inside, doctors and nurses keep watch, guardians of a new kind of magic, one measured not in prayers or potions, but in precision and persistence. For all its flaws and fumbling experiments, Edwardian medicine planted the seed of the modern world's greatest comfort, the belief that science can heal. The future, you realize, isn't just made of steel and electricity, it's made of hope. You wake to the low hum of machinery, rhythmic, steady, almost musical. The smell is unfamiliar yet oddly comforting. Warm oil, ozone, and the faint metallic tang of innovation. You're no longer standing in the streets or laboratories of Edwardian England, but in its beating industrial heart, the engine rooms of progress. This is the era of gears and pistons, the clatter of invention echoing from Manchester to Birmingham, Glasgow to Leeds. The Edwardians inherited the thunder of the Victorian factories but refined them, polishing the grime, quieting the chaos, and reimagining power itself. Steam still rules, but its reign is no longer absolute. You see engines growing smaller, sleeker, more efficient, the proud, hissing beasts of the 19th century now tamed into compact dynamos, humming in the corners of ships, trams, and workshops. The great boilers that once filled entire rooms now fit beneath polished decks. You run a hand along one, its surface warm, vibrating faintly. Inside, the laws of thermodynamics dance in disciplined fury, converting water into movement, heat into motion, theory into empire. Electricity is everywhere now. The word itself, once mystical, even frightening, has become a promise. Edwardians call it the new fire. You follow the current, quite literally, through copper wires that snake along ceilings and disappear behind walls. They carry not only light but life into homes and businesses. In drawing rooms, chandeliers glow without flame. On factory floors, motors replace muscle. The age of manual drudgery begins to fade, replaced by a hum of efficiency that feels almost supernatural. But the true magic lies not in the machines themselves, but in what they represent: control. For the first time in history, power is portable, predictable, and precise. Humanity has harnessed the invisible. One engineer, his hair wild, spectacles fogged from the heat, grins at you as he tightens a bolt on a rotating shaft. "You see this," he says, voice nearly drowned by the din. "We used to feed coal into monsters. Now we feed them equations." He's not exaggerating. The Edwardian years mark the dawn of scientific engineering. The moment invention becomes system, guesswork becomes calculation. Slide rules, drafting boards, and technical manuals replace hunches and intuition. The engineer, once viewed as a tinkerer or eccentric, now stands as a symbol of the modern age, a professional, a visionary, a new kind of hero. And yet, even amid all this precision, there's art in the air. Machines are not merely built to function, they're built to impress. The Edwardians adore ornament. Brass fittings gleam like jewelry. Iron railings curve into filigree. The industrial aesthetic is one of confidence, mechanical grandeur wrapped in elegance. You step outside into a railway station, perhaps Paddington, perhaps Euston, it hardly matters. The air smells of steam and rain, of urgency and possibility. A train waits under the great glass roof, its polished surface reflecting hundreds of tiny lights. It's hard to imagine now, but this was once the pinnacle of speed. 40 miles per hour, faster than most people had ever dreamed of traveling. To an Edwardian traveler, motion itself had become intoxicating. The world was shrinking. Tickets, timetables, telegraphs, all part of a grand choreography that made distances feel negotiable. Businessmen could leave London in the morning and dine in Manchester by evening. The empire's arteries pulsed faster than ever before. And yet, amid the rhythmic puff of engines and the clang of departure bells, there's something strangely human about it all, an excitement tinged with anxiety. Because every new speed came with a new kind of fear. There were doctors who warned that traveling too fast could dislodge the soul. Others claimed that railway tunnels would suffocate passengers by compressing the air. It sounds absurd now, but to those standing at the threshold of modernity, even progress could feel perilous. A man beside you checks his watch, a beautiful thing, small and intricate, the sort of object that could only exist in this age of precision engineering. The ticking inside it mirrors the rhythm of the station clock overhead. Every second is measured, every schedule synchronized. Time itself has been mechanized. Before the railway age, every town kept its own local time, set by the sun. Noon in Bristol might differ from noon in London by 10 minutes. But trains demanded order, and so the Edwardians, practical as ever, invented standard time. Now the entire nation ticks in unison, a single heartbeat of steel and steam. You watch as the locomotive breathes out a great white cloud, its whistle sharp as triumph. The conductor's voice rings out, "All aboard." And suddenly the world moves. The countryside blurs past the window, green, gold, and gray. Telegraph poles flicker by like the rhythm of thought itself. You can almost feel the century picking up speed beneath you. It's not just travel that's accelerating, it's communication. In city offices, clerks in high collars tap away at telegraph keys, their coded messages darting across continents. A single line of wire now connects London to Bombay, to Cape Town, to Sydney. The empire speaks in dots and dashes. And soon, a new voice will join the conversation, one carried not by wire, but by air. Wireless telegraphy. You find yourself now in a dimly lit laboratory, the air thick with static. A young Italian stands at a workbench, eyes bright, hair slightly disheveled. Guglielmo Marconi, or someone very much like him, adjusts a coil and listens to the crackle of unseen energy. A faint click, a stutter, then clarity. A message crosses the sea without a single strand of cable. It's a moment of pure revelation. With wireless communication, distance ceases to mean what it once did. Ships at sea can send distress calls. Armies can coordinate across miles. Voices, soon enough, will travel through the air itself. The Edwardians could feel it, that tremor in the fabric of the possible. The invisible world was becoming tangible, domesticated, obedient to human will. And yet, as with every revolution, not everyone celebrated. You overhear one newspaper editor grumble, "Soon we shall be surrounded by unseen vibrations," and no peace left for the human mind. He wasn't entirely wrong. But as you leave the workshop and step back into the twilight streets, you realize how deeply this age believed in its own momentum. The Edwardians were not afraid of machines, they were enchanted by them. They built not only engines, but empires of imagination. And as the factory whistles fade into the distance, the truth becomes clear. The Edwardians didn't just inherit the industrial world, they humanized it. They made it shine. You're standing on a dock, the air thick with the scent of coal smoke and salt water. Ropes creak. Gulls argue above your head. Before you stretches a ship so vast, so impossibly intricate, that it looks like someone took an Edwardian mansion and decided it should float. Its name is painted in gold across the hull, not Titanic tonight, though the memory of her shadow lingers nearby, but one of her proud sisters, another ocean liner that promised the world speed, luxury, and mastery over nature. You feel the vibration through the planks under your feet. Steam surges through pipes, and the low, steady thump of pistons fills the morning. These are the mechanical heartbeats of empire ships that connected continents, carried people, ideas, letters, and ambitions across the globe. Welcome to the Edwardian Empire of invention. Everywhere you turn, innovation isn't just about gadgets anymore, it's geopolitical. It's about reach. The British Empire at this point isn't just a patchwork of colonies, it's a network, a humming organism tied together by cables, ships, and signals. The sun famously never sets on it, partly because its telegraph lines never sleep. You glance up. Above the cranes, a set of wires glint faintly in the sunlight, stretching out toward the horizon. That's the global telegraph system, the internet of its day. Messages that once took months now flash across oceans in minutes. Governors can consult London before breakfast. Traders can buy and sell commodities across hemispheres before the ink on their ledgers dries. A sailor standing nearby smirks and says, "They say the empire runs on tea, but really it runs on telegraph." You can't help but grin. He's not wrong. The Edwardian world, for all its elegance and order, is a web spun from metal, powered by steam, and glowing faintly with electricity. Still, the most astonishing part isn't the scale. It's the belief, the sheer confidence that progress is not only possible but inevitable. From the humming dynamos of London to the railways that snake through India and Africa, the Edwardians saw invention as destiny. And that belief, that missionary zeal for innovation, was exported just as zealously as any product or law. Engineers, surveyors, telegraph operators, the foot soldiers of the technological age, sailed to every corner of the map. In Cairo, a new electric tram rattles past pyramids older than recorded history. In Bombay, typewriters click beside clerks in linen suits. In Nairobi, a railway line cuts through savannah once ruled only by lions and legend. You can almost hear the Edwardian refrain, "Progress will bring order." Of course, not everyone agreed. You overhear one colonial official murmuring uneasily that the machine makes us gods abroad but strangers at home. Historians still argue whether the age's technology truly unified the world or merely wired inequality into it. You walk through a telegraph office now, a strange, quiet cathedral of tapping. The clerks work with almost religious concentration, decoding and re-encoding messages from Cairo, Delhi, Sydney, Cape Town. Their instruments click and blink like nervous hearts. On the wall, a map of the world glows faintly, copper lines tracing seas and continents. At the center, London gleams like a spider at the hub of its web. It's beautiful and unsettling all at once. One of the operators, noticing your gaze, chuckles softly. "The whole planet's talking," he says, "but no one's listening." Outside, a newspaper boy's voice cuts through the hum. Wireless from the Cape. Message from Canada. News no longer drifts, it races. That's how the Edwardians experienced modernity, as speed you could feel in your chest. And yet, amid this triumph, something tender lingers. Take the postcard, for example, a tiny rectangle of optimism. The Edwardians adored them. You buy one from a nearby stall, the edges gilded, the image a colorized photograph of Brighton Pier. You scribble a note, arrived safely. The sea is grand, love from tomorrow. You laugh softly at your own joke before realizing how true it feels. In this era, the future really is sailing beside you. Now you move inland back to London, where the empire's pulse beats loudest. The city smells of rain, metal, and ambition. Newspapers call it the workshop of the world. Above you, the sky is webbed with tram cables. Beneath your feet, the first deep tunnels of the underground hum with motion. You board one of the early electric trains, stepping into a carriage lined with polished wood and brass. The air is surprisingly clean, the electric motors silent compared to the clattering steam engines they replaced. Across from you, a group of businessmen chat about the wireless. Another checks his pocket watch, muttering about time zones and cables. You realize that London itself has become a laboratory, an experiment in living fast. The underground, opened decades earlier, is now fully electrified, a modern marvel that allows the city to breathe. And like every Edwardian invention, it carries symbolism. Beneath the bowler hats and advertisements for Pear's soap, something new is forming, the rhythm of the modern metropolis. You emerge above ground into the swirl of Piccadilly Circus, its lights flickering to life as dusk falls. Neon, the newest electrical art form, hums softly overhead. You watch a giant sign spell out words in glowing script. Drink Bovril for strength. You smirk, the future always sells itself. Further along, a wireless mast rises from the roof of a building, Marconi's London Station. From here, signals leap invisibly into the sky, skipping across the channel to France. What once required ships and wires now travels by air, unseen and unstoppable. Historians still argue whether this was the first real moment of globalization. The instant humanity began to think of itself as one connected system. But as you gaze up at the web of wires, you feel the paradox. The more connected people became, the more they worried about losing touch. Letters grew shorter, travel grew faster, conversations became mechanical. And yet people kept inventing. Because the empire of invention was also an empire of hope. The belief that knowledge could conquer distance, ignorance, even fate itself. You stroll down toward the river. On the embankment, an electric lamppost flickers softly beside a marble statue, a tribute to engineers and explorers. Beneath it, the Thames glows with reflections of modern life, light, steam, and the shimmer of progress. A young woman passes, clutching a pamphlet that reads, "Votes for Women." Her stride is quick, her eyes certain. Behind her, another movement hums quietly, the social revolution that would redefine who gets to share in this empire of tomorrow. But that's for later. For now, the city hums, the ships glide, and somewhere in the distance, a spark leaps from one antenna to another, bridging worlds. And as you stand there, under the steady whisper of electricity, you realize something simple yet extraordinary. The Edwardians didn't just invent machines. They invented connection. They imagined a world that could speak across oceans, move across time zones, and dream across boundaries. You take one last look at the water, smooth, dark, endless, and you swear you can almost hear it whisper back. You wake to a sound that's oddly rhythmic like rain but sharper. Clack, clack, clack. A pause, clack, clack. It's not weather, it's work. You're sitting in an Edwardian office, sunlight slanting through high windows and catching on brass fixtures. The air smells of ink, paper, and determination. Rows of desks stretch before you, each manned or, increasingly, womaned by typists tapping at black, gleaming machines. You've entered the age of paper dreams and typewriter rhythms. The hum of the industrial age has moved indoors, softened from the roar of engines to the chatter of clerks. Progress now lives in paperwork, memos, ledgers, telegrams, and neatly carbon-copied correspondence. You can almost feel the pulse of bureaucracy, a new organism of order and routine. The Edwardian office is a different kind of factory. Instead of steel and smoke, it produces information, columns of numbers, typed letters, schedules, and contracts. This is the age when organization itself becomes an invention. You walk past a clerk who's balancing a tall stack of files, each bound with red tape. Yes, that's where the phrase comes from. The files contain everything from railway logistics to patent applications. A decade earlier, such complexity would have been unimaginable. But the modern world, with its factories, trains, and telegraphs, demands an equal sophistication in administration. You glance at the wall clock. It's precise, almost military. Every worker's day is a symphony of scheduled movement. The manager, mustache immaculate, strolls between desks with a clipboard in hand. The conductor of an orchestra made entirely of carbon paper. You sit down at a Remington typewriter, feeling the smooth metal keys beneath your fingers. Each strike lands with a small explosion of sound, one letter at a time, progress hammered into permanence. The typewriter, more than almost any Edwardian invention, democratized communication. Suddenly, words could travel fast, clean, and legible. No more squinting at ink blots and smudged handwriting. Historians still argue whether the typewriter empowered women or simply trapped them in a new form of labor. But there's no denying its transformative power. You look to your left, a row of typists, mostly young women, their hair pinned, their wrists straight. Their speed is mesmerizing. They're nicknamed typewriter girls, and for many, it's their first taste of professional independence. One looks up, meeting your eyes with a half-smile. Faster than you, I bet. She's right. You're still on the first sentence, and she's already produced an entire page. The office itself is a strange blend of the old and the new. Ornate wooden furniture meets the cold practicality of filing cabinets and electric fans. Paper stacks reach toward the ceiling, and yet everything hums with an almost musical precision. It's not glamorous, but it's revolutionary. Because this, right here, is the beginning of the modern workplace. The telephone rings, shrill and commanding. You pick it up and hear a man's voice miles away, but somehow intimate. "Is that you, Kingsley? The figures for Cairo came through." You nod instinctively, even though he can't see. The phone has made conversation immediate, informal, human. And that changes everything. Business speeds up. Decisions shorten. The Edwardian dream of control over machines over time extends into language itself. Words no longer crawl by post, they sprint across wires. You wander into the back room, quieter here, but filled with another kind of rhythm. The low hum of calculating machines. They're clunky, boxy, and vaguely intimidating, mechanical brains made of cogs and gears. Clerks feed them figures and crank handles, producing totals faster than any human could. These are the ancestors of computers, though no one here would dare call them that. One clerk grins and says, "Beats arithmetic on paper, eh?" You nod because it's true, and because you can sense that he's touching the edge of something enormous. The Edwardians may not have had silicon chips, but they understood data, the power of keeping it, sorting it, sharing it. The early 20th century runs not just on engines, but on information flow. You move to another floor, the communications department. Rows of telegraph keys click in unison, connecting this office to outposts around the globe. Messages are received, decoded, typed, and filed, a choreography of intellect and industry. A young messenger bursts in, breathless, waving a note. Wireless from the Cape, they've confirmed the shipment. Applause ripples across the room. You can feel it, the pride of being connected to something vast and invisible. Outside, rain taps against the windows. The street below is filled with delivery boys on bicycles, their satchels bulging with typed correspondence. Every letter, every invoice, every telegram is a small piece of the same grand puzzle, an empire run by paper and persistence. And here's the paradox. For all their mechanical precision, the Edwardians are sentimental about their paperwork. Letters are kept, tied with ribbons. Ledgers are written with flourishes. Even the dullest receipt carries a whisper of artistry. You run your finger over embossed stationery, the ink slightly raised under your skin. It's tactile proof of trust, of transaction, of civilization itself. Later, you follow a secretary into her tiny, neatly ordered workspace. On her desk sits a new marvel, an adding machine. She demonstrates, pressing the keys lightly. The result clicks into place, neat as magic. No more guesswork, she says. Numbers behave now. You can't help but laugh softly, because that's exactly what the Edwardians believed. That the modern world, with enough order and invention, could finally behave. In the corner, a phonograph hums quietly, playing a tinny waltz from the previous night's dance hall. It's an incongruous touch, romance in the temple of routine, but it fits. Even the most bureaucratic heart beats to a melody. As the afternoon fades, the manager announces it's time to clock out. Workers rise, stretching stiff wrists and shoulders. Hats are retrieved, papers stacked, lamps turned off. The silence that follows feels almost sacred. You watch the typists leave in clusters, chatting softly about pay raises, suffrage marches, and what film might be showing this weekend. The office door swings shut behind them, leaving the smell of carbon paper and ambition hanging in the air. For a moment, the room feels timeless, like you could walk into any modern cubicle and find its ghost here. The posture, the pressure, the balance between pride and fatigue, all unmistakably familiar. Because this is where it began, the white-collar world, the age of information, the quiet revolution of keys and ink and order. And as you look down at the blank page in the typewriter before you, you notice the faint indentation of letters pressed into the ribbon. It spells out a sentence someone must have typed earlier in the day. The future is in the details. You sit back, listening as the last few typewriters fall silent, their echoes drifting upward like raindrops fading into mist. And somewhere faintly, the clock strikes 6. You open your eyes to the sound of laughter, bright, carefree, rolling like waves. You're standing on a seaside promenade, the air salty and sharp, a brass band playing just out of sight. Children in sailor suits dart between adults with parasols. Somewhere, someone is selling ice cream, a new kind of indulgence that melts faster than manners can keep up. Welcome to the Edwardian age of leisure, speed, and the new human. You've spent so long amid the engines, offices, and telegraph wires that this feels like another world entirely. A world where time isn't measured in productivity, but in pleasure. The Edwardians, for all their love of order and invention, were also the first to discover the modern luxury of time off. You stroll along the pier. Behind you, the grand hotels rise like palaces, all wrought iron balconies and striped awnings. Ahead, the sea stretches out, calm and endless, dotted with steamships and paddle boats. The smell of salt and coal smoke mingle, oddly harmonious. It's Sunday, or at least it feels like one, and you realize something remarkable. For the first time in history, ordinary people can afford to take a break. You pass a group of factory workers' families, really picnicking on the grass, laughing with mouths full of sandwiches. Just a few decades earlier, such leisure would have been unthinkable. The industrial machine left no time for rest. But the Edwardians changed that. Trains made day trips possible. Paid holidays began to appear. Public parks were opened. And for the first time, the working class wasn't just a phrase of toil, it was a population beginning to breathe. A whistle blows from the promenade's edge. You turn to see a line of bicycles gliding past, women in flowing skirts, men in straw hats, everyone laughing at the sheer ridiculousness of balance and speed. The bicycle, simple as it seems, is one of the great Edwardian revolutions. It collapses geography, defies chaperones, and, most scandalously, gives women freedom of movement. Suffragettes will later joke that the bicycle did more for emancipation than Parliament. You try one yourself, wobbling at first, the wind catching your hat. A small boy shouts, "Lean with it, not against it." You do, and suddenly the world moves beneath you, smooth, effortless, alive. The hum of rubber on road feels almost electric. There's something profoundly Edwardian in that sensation. The belief that humans and machines could move together, harmoniously, joyfully. You glide past a poster advertising Brooklyn's motor racing circuit speed, thrills, modernity. The word modernity itself is new and thrilling. You imagine the crowd gathered there, ladies clutching binoculars, gentlemen betting shillings on drivers wrapped in leather and goggles. At Brooklyn's, the automobile stops being a curiosity and becomes a symbol of human daring. Drivers push their cars beyond reason, engines roaring at nearly 70 miles per hour, speeds that, to an Edwardian, brush against the divine. Historians still argue whether these spectacles were about engineering progress or sheer adrenaline worship. Either way, they mark the birth of modern sport, the blending of performance, machinery, and audience awe. Back on the seafront, you notice a camera flash, a moment captured forever on silver film. The Edwardians adored their cameras. With Kodak's Brownie, photography finally escaped the studio. Families could take snapshots, travelers could preserve their journeys, lovers could exchange portraits like whispered promises. You step into a booth, grin, and hold still. Click. The shutter snaps. The photograph, once developed, will show a stranger with your smile, a ghost from the future, accidentally fitting in. Now the band shifts its tune to a jaunty march. You follow the sound toward the pier's end, where a group of young men in striped suits dive dramatically into the sea. Cheers rise from the crowd. Swimming, once a private or medical activity, has become public spectacle. New bathing costumes, daringly short by Edwardian standards, scandalize the newspapers and delight the wearers. The human body, after centuries of repression, is learning to move again. That movement isn't confined to the beach. Across the cities, Edwardians are discovering the power of exercise and sport. Tennis courts gleam, cricket pitches fill, and early gymnasiums begin to open their iron-framed doors. You find yourself inside one now, a place half temple, half torture chamber. Rows of dumbbells, wooden rings, and pulley machines glint under gaslight. A man in a neatly trimmed mustache barks instructions to a line of sweating youths. "Discipline the flesh, and the mind shall follow," he proclaims. And you can't help but chuckle. It sounds like something straight off a motivational poster. But beneath the bluster lies something real. The Edwardians are crafting a new idea, the modern body, healthy, athletic, and efficient, a mirror to their machines. You step outside again, wiping imaginary sweat from your brow, and watch as a motor car zooms past, its passengers laughing, scarves whipping in the wind. Speed, once dangerous, now feels divine. The Edwardians are addicted to it. Motor cars, airships, ocean liners, everything is designed to move faster, smoother, more beautifully. Even their fashion mirrors the obsession. Lighter fabrics, simpler cuts, freedom of motion woven into every seam. The corset loosens. The bowler hat gives way to the soft cap. And though the aristocrats still cling to their waistcoats, the silhouette of the future, lean, practical, mobile, is already visible. As evening falls, you find yourself in a music hall, all velvet curtains, cigarette smoke, and laughter. On stage, a comedian cracks a joke about motor manners, drawing roars from the crowd. A singer follows, crooning about love on the flying machine. The lyrics are playful, but the sentiment is sincere. The Edwardians are in love with momentum. Between acts, you hear snippets of conversation about suffrage rallies, cycling clubs, travel to Paris. Everyone, it seems, is going somewhere. Even at rest, the age hums with motion. Later, you step outside into the cool night air. The sea glows faintly under the moon, reflecting electric lights from the promenade. Couples stroll, the sound of their laughter mingling with the distant churn of waves. You realize you've been walking for hours, but you're not tired. The pace of this world has carried you along. Leisure here is not idleness. It's exploration. It's the joy of seeing how far humanity can stretch in distance, in daring, in delight. A young woman leans over the pier railing beside you, gazing out. "It feels," she says softly, "like the world is holding its breath before something wonderful happens." You nod. You both feel it, that electric anticipation. The sense that the Edwardians, for all their pomp and polish, are standing right at the edge of something immense. Of course, history knows what happens next. But for now, the music plays, the waves sigh, and the lights shimmer like stars. And you let yourself believe, just for this moment, that the future really is something you can ride toward on a bicycle, grinning into the wind. The next morning dawns with the smell of oil and ozone, the perfume of progress. You wake not in a seaside hotel, but in a workshop of polished brass and humming dynamos. Someone has turned on a generator. A bulb flickers, then steadies, flooding the room with pale, perfect light. Electricity. You've entered the heart of the Edwardian transformation, the invisible revolution. In this age, light itself becomes a commodity, a symbol, and a promise. Where the Victorians worshipped coal and steam, the Edwardians begin to revere the current that hums unseen through copper veins. It's not just illumination, it's connection. On a workbench lies a tangle of wires, glass bulbs, and fuses. An engineer in rolled-up sleeves adjusts a filament and grins at you. "She'll burn steady for 100 hours now," he says proudly. "Edison may have sparked it, but we're the ones keeping the world lit." The world is lighting up, literally and figuratively. Electric trams glide through cities. Theaters glow after sunset. Streets once ruled by gaslight now shine with the steady confidence of the modern age. Electricity changes everything. Factories run longer, homes grow brighter, cities never truly sleep again. You step outside into a lamplit London evening, not gas, but electric, cold, and pure. The skyline shimmers. The future has a pulse, and it hums softly in the wires overhead. On a corner, a young man sells postcards of the new marvels. The electric tube, illuminated Piccadilly, wireless telegraphy at sea. Each image glows faintly under the lamps, a reflection of the wonder that grips the world. You buy one showing a strange, angular tower, not the Eiffel Tower but something newer, bristling with aerials. The caption reads, "Marconi's Wireless Station, Cornwall." You smile. The name is everywhere these days. Guglielmo Marconi, the Italian-born genius who turned the air itself into a messenger. With his wireless telegraph, words can leap across oceans faster than ships can sail or cables can carry. In 1901, he sent the first signal from Cornwall to Newfoundland, 3 dots. The Morse letter S. It might seem simple, but those 3 dots shattered the silence of the Atlantic forever. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine it, the invisible bridge of energy arcing across waves and sky, binding continents together. For the first time, distance begins to lose its meaning. Standing there, you realize the Edwardians aren't just inventing new machines. They're inventing a new relationship with space. The planet is shrinking, and the human voice is learning to travel at the speed of light. A cab pulls up beside you, motorized, not horse-drawn. The driver tips his cap. "To the station." You nod and climb in, curious to see where this current of invention will take you next. The car rumbles forward, and soon you're inside the great marble hall of King's Cross, where steam and steel mingle with the crackle of new electric signals. The train waiting there is no ordinary one. Painted in deep green with gold trim, it's a marvel of Edwardian design. Elegant, powerful, and ready to eat up miles of track at 60 miles per hour. You board, finding a seat near a window. The whistle blows, and the world outside begins to move backward. The countryside flashes by, telegraph poles flicking past like punctuation marks in an endless sentence of progress. Each pole carries messages to and from the corners of the empire, news of trade, politics, and weather. The wires hum with life. Across the aisle, a newspaper headline catches your eye. "The Age of Invention, New Wonders Every Week." And indeed, it's true. Every week seems to bring something new. The first vacuum cleaner, noisy but miraculous. The electric kettle, promising tea in half the time. The talking machine, Edison's phonograph, turning voices into spinning cylinders. The motion picture camera, capturing reality itself in flickering light. It's an avalanche of innovation, and the Edwardians are both thrilled and slightly overwhelmed. The future is arriving faster than anyone imagined. You watch as the train plunges into a tunnel, the world outside replaced by your reflection in the glass. A strange traveler from another century, surrounded by the hum of newness. When the train emerges again, it's dusk. Smoke rises from distant factories, and on the horizon you glimpse something vast and gleaming. A ship anchored at port, its decks strung with electric light. It's Titanic. Even from afar, it's breathtaking, not just a ship, but a floating palace, a testament to human confidence. To the Edwardians, Titanic represents everything they believe in: mastery of technology, triumph over nature, and elegance refined by engineering. You walk toward it, joining the throng of passengers and dockworkers. Luggage is piled high, porters shout instructions, and the band plays a cheerful waltz. No one here knows what's coming, how could they? For now, Titanic is a miracle of progress, the pinnacle of Edwardian ambition. You stand at the base of the great gangway, staring up at the hull. The letters gleam in the floodlights, RMS Titanic. Beneath them, a small child tugs at her mother's sleeve and whispers, "It's too big to sink." The mother smiles and nods. "Of course, dear, nothing this grand could ever sink." You look back at the sea, dark and infinite, and for a brief, uneasy second, the electric lights seem to flicker. But the band plays on, and history moves forward. For the Edwardians, progress is a kind of faith, unshakable, radiant, and doomed to collide with the iceberg of reality. Yet even knowing what lies ahead, you can't help but feel awe. They believed in something immense, that through invention, beauty, and courage, humanity could transcend its limits. And for a time, brief, brilliant, golden, they did. You linger on the deck of the Titanic as the band's final note fades into the salt-cold night. The sea stretches endlessly outward, black silk stitched with a few pale stars. You can almost hear the heartbeat of an era pulsing beneath the hum of the engines. The Edwardians don't know it, but they are balanced on a knife edge. Every gleaming invention, every electric marvel carries a shadow. The same dynamo that lights a ballroom also powers the guns that wait in European armories. You walk along the promenade, the air sharp with ocean spray. Couples stroll, ladies in white gloves and men in tuxedos, whispering about wireless messages from shore, stock reports, society news, a royal engagement. Marconi's technology has made gossip global. It's thrilling, intimate, almost magical. And yet, somewhere inside the ship, an operator grumbles about the workload. Too many signals, too many voices fighting for air. If they keep this up, he mutters, we'll drown in our own chatter. You smile grimly. If only he could glimpse the age of smartphones and endless notifications ahead, he'd have a headache for a century. As the liner cuts through the North Atlantic, you think about the world it leaves behind. Edwardian London, all guilt and grime. Paris, decadent and restless. Berlin, flexing its industrial muscles. Everyone's building faster ships, taller buildings, deadlier weapons. They call it progress, but it sounds a lot like a drumbeat. Historians still argue whether the Edwardians sensed the storm approaching. Some say they lived in a dream of perpetual sunlight. Others claim that the era's writers, Kipling, Forster, Conrad, felt the tremor beneath their feet. Perhaps both are true. The Edwardians danced because they could feel the floor cracking. You wander through the ship's smoking room. Cigars glow like miniature suns. A banker boasts of new motorcar investments. An engineer sketches plans for aircraft larger than houses. The air is thick with wealth and caffeine and unshakable optimism. A gramophone whirs in the corner, Caruso's voice rising, falling, rolling like the tide. A passenger raises a glass. To the future. You sip and listen. It's easy to be caught up in it, the certainty that the world will only get better, shinier, faster. But you know that progress, unchecked, has teeth. The next morning, the sea lies smooth as glass. Ice warnings arrive through the wireless, ignored or delayed. The orchestra rehearses. Children play on deck. And when night falls again, the stars glitter harder, crueler. You know the rest. The collision, the tilt, the cries in the dark. The ship that was too big to sink becomes the century's first great metaphor. When dawn breaks, the survivors shiver under gray blankets. Progress has taken its first toll. Back on shore, the newspapers scream tragedy etc., but by week's end, attention has already shifted to suffragette marches, to motor races, to new aeroplanes in France. The machine of progress stutters, then accelerates again. Humanity is relentless like that. You drift inland, following the telegraph lines that hum with gossip and grief. In London, inventors keep inventing. Electric taxis jostle for space with horse-drawn carriages. Women in long skirts crowd factory gates, demanding fair pay. You pause at one of the suffrage parades, purple and green banners snapping in the wind, voices chanting for the vote. One marcher hands you a leaflet. Modern inventions mean nothing without modern minds. She smiles fiercely. We're inventing equality next. There's the paradox again. This era builds airships and electric cookers, yet half its people are still denied a say in their own future. Progress can be selective, even hypocritical. In a nearby cafe, a writer scratches furiously at a notebook. He imagines a world after all this invention, a world where technology might chain as much as it frees. You glance over his shoulder and catch the title, The Time Machine. H.G. Wells again, whispering warnings through fiction. Later you stroll through an exhibition hall filled with wonders, an electric escalator gliding like a magic carpet, a typewriter that prints carbon copies, a telephone that can broadcast music down a line. The crowd gasps. A young boy tugs his father's sleeve. What will they think of next? His father chuckles. Something marvelous, I'm sure. But behind them, a newspaper vendor murmurs about assassinations in the Balkans, about alliances and mobilizations. History is gathering momentum, gears turning faster than anyone can control. By 1914, the Edwardian age, the long summer of invention, is already unraveling. A gunshot in Sarajevo lights the fuse. Within weeks, Europe's railways, telegraphs, and factories are repurposed for war. You watch trains once filled with commuters now carrying soldiers. Factories that made bicycles now forge bullets. The same industrial efficiency that electrified homes now feeds trenches. It's horrifying and mesmerizing how easily invention flips from servant to master. Historians still argue whether the war killed the Edwardian spirit or simply revealed what it always was, the belief that humans could engineer their way out of anything. In the mud of Flanders, invention doesn't stop, it mutates. Engineers design tanks, field telephones, early radio sets, gas masks. Even in destruction, creativity refuses to die. The modern world isn't ending. It's being reforged under artillery fire. When the guns finally fall silent, the Edwardian world is gone. The old certainties, class, empire, faith in progress, have shattered. But their inventions remain. Light bulbs, telephones, automobiles, airplanes, electric homes. They've outlived their makers, carrying their optimism and their hubris into the decades ahead. You stand on a quiet platform after the war, watching a new generation board trains under electric lamps. The air smells of smoke and fresh paint. Posters promise homes for heroes and a new age dawns. And in a sense it does. The 1920s hum with the echoes of Edwardian dreams. Jazz records, radio broadcasts, neon lights, skyscrapers. The rhythm of progress continues, syncopated but unstoppable. You take one last look at the glowing horizon, remembering that first flicker of electric light, that first thrum of a motorcar engine, that first wireless whisper across the ocean. All those beginnings, tangled together, have brought you here. The Edwardians thought they were inventing convenience. They were actually inventing us. The world you stand in now hums quietly, steady, glowing, alive with the ghosts of Edwardian ideas. The night outside your window flickers with their fingerprints. The light bulb above your head, the engine in the street, the phone glowing beside your bed. Every modern comfort, every screen and hum and signal is an echo of that dazzling, reckless dawn more than a century ago. You exhale slowly. The air smells faintly metallic, as if still charged with the static of all that invention. The Edwardians are long gone, their fine suits and corsets dust in museum drawers. Yet their imagination lingers in the circuitry around you. You flip a switch, click, and a lamp floods your room with soft light. You lift a phone to your ear, buzz, and invisible waves deliver another human voice across continents. You open a laptop, the descendant of the clattering typewriter. You glance at a plane streaking silver across the sky, descendant of rickety wood and canvas contraptions. You might smile at how fragile it all once was. A few men tinkering in sheds, women testing appliances that sometimes caught fire, chemists blowing things up by accident. Yet that fragile chaos birthed the blueprint for modern living. Historians still argue whether it was luck, timing, or the sheer audacity of a generation convinced that impossible was just a temporary condition. But either way, you live in their aftermath. Look at your reflection in the black mirror of your phone screen, the faint glow painting your face. The Edwardians would have called that sorcery. You call it a Tuesday. They built for convenience, they created dependence. They reached for beauty, they unleashed speed. They dreamed of leisure, they invented restlessness. And yet there's a kind of poetry in it, isn't there? The way their optimism still hums beneath everything we do. Every time a jet climbs, a bulb flickers, a camera flashes, a message flies invisibly through the air. It's them. The Edwardian whisper, look what we started. You walk down a city street at midnight and the skyline sparkles, electric constellations where stars once reigned alone. The street lamps curve like halos over cars that purr instead of rattle. Music drifts from a passing cafe, the notes bouncing through open doors and streaming apps alike. Progress never sleeps, it just upgrades. But if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint heartbeat of that age beneath the noise. The steady, mechanical rhythm of innovation mixed with a distinctly human pulse. You feel it in the hum of escalators, in the distant rumble of trains, in the vibration of your phone when a message arrives from someone half a world away. Those Edwardians were inventing their future, but also yours. You think back to their world of hats and horsehair and telegrams. It seems impossibly distant, yet strangely familiar. The same thrill when a new gadget launches. The same arguments about what progress costs. The same hope that cleverness can outpace chaos. They imagined wireless communication, global travel, home automation, and we delivered it, refined it, and made it mundane. They feared their machines might make humans lazy. We fear ours might make humans obsolete. The conversation hasn't ended. It's simply changed medium, from smoky gentlemen's clubs to glowing comment sections. One fringe tidbit you can't resist recalling. In 1902, a London paper confidently predicted that by 2000, people would fly to work in personal airships and dine on pills instead of food. A century later, you can order pizza by drone, but you still crave the smell of something warm from the oven. Humanity adapts, but it never stops being deliciously human. The Edwardian dream wasn't perfection. It was motion. The relentless, hopeful, messy insistence that tomorrow could be better if we just built it right. And in that sense, you're still an Edwardian at heart, chasing the shimmer of the next bright thing, convinced that the future is a workshop, not a waiting room. You pass a display window glowing with sleek devices, each one a descendant of a dusty Edwardian prototype. Behind the glass, your reflection stands surrounded by light. You realize something quietly profound. They never truly left us. They just became the circuitry, the rhythm, the hum that carries us forward. You smile, whispering into the current, "Thanks for the spark." The street hums back softly. And now, as you drift towards sleep, let the hum of all that invention fade into something slower, gentler. Imagine those Edwardian streets again, lamp posts glowing, carriages giving way to early motor cars, laughter spilling from cafes where people first spoke across telephones. The night air cool against your face, the soft buzz of progress mingling with distant piano notes. Breathe it in, the optimism, the curiosity, the sheer absurd courage of people who built the modern world with little more than brass, steam, and stubborn hope. Their world glimmered on the edge of catastrophe, but they reached upward anyway. And though they never saw your age, they dreamed it bright, connected, alive. Let that thought settle. Every click, every hum, every glimmer of light around you is their lullaby, still playing a century later. So close your eyes now. Let the streetlights dim, the engines quiet, the inventions rest. You're safe inside the glow of all their dreams made real. The current still flows, and tomorrow will hum just as softly. Good night, inventor of the future. Sleep easy under Edwardian light. Sweet dreams.